As a young kid, I'd say 5, 6, 7, that age, one of the things that I coveted, that I always wanted, was that prize in the bottom of a cereal box. I take it they don't do that anymore, but there was something that I always had to have. And when you're the youngest of 3 boys and there's only one prize in the box, it can cause some tense moments around the breakfast table. And we did. We had arguments over who was going to get the prize. The rule was in our house, whoever got it, whoever bowl the prize landed in, that's who got it. But that wasn't good enough for the 3 of us. We had to come up with an addendum to that rule, a gentleman's agreement, if you will, that you could not manipulate the box in any way. You couldn't shake it. You couldn't pour more or less. You always had to pour the same amount. It was kind of ridiculous. But that's what we did. And I will tell you, there were certainly arguments over and accusations of shaking the box, manipulating, pouring too much, all those things. I asked my parents this week what was going through their mind when we were sitting around the table arguing over this prize, this treasure, if you will, in the bottom of a cereal box. And my dad, who doesn't say much but says a lot with his expressions, looked at me as if we had gone back in time and were sitting around that breakfast table. Kind of scared me a little bit. My mom, I asked my mom, and she just kind of shook her head and said, the only thing that went through my mind was, I can't wait for school to start. Now, obviously, as I've gotten older, the treasures that I covet, if you will, are different. Our priorities change as we get older. We start to see and understand things that are more important than things that we first thought. And that's what Jesus is inviting us today to remember what's truly important, and to prioritize our hearts in such a way that we seek the treasures of heaven and not the things of this earth, the treasures of this earth, because the treasures and the possessions that we have here, we can't take with us. The only thing that we can take with us is what's in our heart, how we love one another, how we forgive one another, how we look after one another and come to those in need, how we serve the poor, how we alleviate suffering and ensure that there's hope in those around us. And that's what he's confronted with in that question or that statement in the gospel story today, that young brother demanding Jesus tell his older brother to share the inheritance with him. And Jesus reminds him how important it is to stand on guard against that sin of covetousness, because coveting things, being greedy, it sows discord, whereas love always sows unity. And that parable that Jesus gives just serves as a great reminder of that. That rich man in the parable today, his sin is not his possessions, it's not his wealth. Having things and being rich is not sinful at all. But where his sin comes about is the fact that his wealth is what defines him. That's who he is. And that's how he sees himself in all that he has. So much so that he's blind to everyone else around him. He's blind to those in his neighborhood, to those who are suffering, who could benefit from his abundance and from his goodness. He could alleviate the suffering and the hunger of those around him. But he chooses not to because he's so blind to it. He's so concerned about his own possessions, hoarding them, keeping them to himself. And that's why God calls him a fool, because that night his life is going to be demanded of him. And he's going to go before God. And what is he going to show them? He has nothing in his heart to show them, to show God. And so that's what Jesus is reminding us, always to seek the treasures of heaven, the treasures of love, the treasures of mercy, the treasures of forgiveness, the gifts and qualities that Christ came to give us and to lead us. And every time we come into this place, that's what we open ourselves up to, from Christ's word, his teachings, to fill us with his love, with his strength, with his guidance. And every time we come forward to receive Christ in this Eucharist, we receive the fullness of heaven. We receive all the powers that heaven has to give to us to help us go along as we move along in the week ahead. That's the gift that Jesus gives us. And for us, we have to open our hearts in order to receive that. Let us pray that we may continue to seek the treasures of heaven and also in the abundance and goodness. Let me rephrase this. I kind of messed up. And I'll just keep it real simple and then walk away. You can't give away what you don't have. And that's why it's important to come here to receive the treasures of heaven so that we can share those treasures with the people around us, so that those who are suffering can know hope, those who are in need can know that there's someone out there that cares about them, that loves them, so that they get a glimpse, a view of what the love of God is like. And Jesus chose us to use us to do that for others around us. Okay, how's that? All right.